Welcome. For all the airline executives in the audience, there are travelers who do not fly on planes, just so you know. They're very often not aware of that. Now, seriously, our three panelists today have very, very critical roles in organizations that are doing very, very difficult logistical work in travel. Everybody talks about connected trips and interoperability. These guys are living it on day to day. Veronica at Omio is connecting 1,000 different suppliers, crossing ferries and car rentals and trains and airport transfers across the board. Francois at Eurostar is trying to get the trains to run on time across 5 countries, right? UK, France, Belgium, Germany, Netherlands. And of course, Jen at Uber has a very interesting role where she's integrating Uber's platform with public transit and doing some really incredible things there. So their jobs may be harder than yours. So it's really some really important work. So I think whenever we talk about travel, we've got to start with the traveler. So how do you see the traveler really changing their needs and priorities? And
Thank you, Robert. I'll start, and good morning, everyone. It's great to be here today. So what we are seeing more and more, and honestly, that was the reason why we started in the first place with Omio, where there was a fragmented industry, in the travel sector, with a lot of need of innovations. What we're seeing from a travel perspective is that they more and more want to be in control. They want to have access to all the information. They want to have all the options at their hand, right? They want to be able to then choose whatever way they want to travel and do it in the simplest, fastest, according to the criteria that they want to choose way possible. And that's exactly what we're trying to do with Omio, right? Trying to provide this single place where you have all the informations across all the different modes at your fingertip. And we're seeing that being the enabler is also what is driving some of these changes in behavior that you just mentioned before between ground, air, and all the different transport modes.
So they want faster, cheaper, better, just like everyone in technology.
Exactly.
Excellent. What about you, Francois?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more actually with what you just said, Veronica. I think customers are really expecting much easier end-to-end experience from the booking to the travel to even after the travel if something's gone wrong or after sales. So yeah, they're expecting something simple. They're expecting to have all the information, that everything is laid out very clearly, that they have a good idea of what's coming up during their journey and the different steps of that journey, and that they feel accompanied and cared for all throughout the journey.
And you're doing some very interesting things with accessibility, which is really enabling some travelers to do things that before had a lot of challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so generally we agree in terms of having that platform that can bring together all different modes in an easy to understand way to look at journey planning and book. But generally also, we view affordability as a major problem, and there's 25 million folks in the US that live in transit deserts where access to public transit isn't as good as the demand for it. And so we are specifically partnering with transit agencies to help folks with disabilities or folks that live in transit deserts get access to transportation in really new, affordable ways through the Uber platform.
No, that's great. Do you see any changes in terms of, say, the demographics or the Gen Zs and those sorts of things looking for different experiences? Or is it really kind of everybody's looking for how they can do accomplish their own travel goals their own way? Is it generated or anything that stands out?
I think for us is what we are seeing is across, across generations, across demographic and segments. Obviously, you have some specificities, right? So that then, according to the segment, you may want, to have more, focus on affordability, more on the length or, the type of mode. So you also have that element. And, the objective and the goal for all of us, I think, is to make sure that we try, to make it the best possible across all the different needs of the customers. Yeah.
I'll say we have recently implemented a call center booking solution to allow folks to feel comfortable using an Uber platform who might not be native to using it. And that has really taken off with a lot of our older disabled type population that we're really proud of.
That's right. Yeah, because you also have the situation where you have people looking for least expensive affordability, things like that. But then there are also people looking for premium experiences too. So how are you dealing with those? I mean, all these different traveler personas are coming at you and trying to keep it organized.
Exactly. And you know, the key is all the different touch points, right, that you have with these users to make sure that then you make them aware what are the options, and you guide them in the pre-booking, during the booking, and in the post-booking in the way that then is more suitable for them. As Jen said, right, so, you know, the different ways, for example, that you can provide customer support, so that, especially for us, is a big element of, you know, differentiation 24/7 across all different channels, is exactly for that, right, so that you make sure that you respond to all the needs.
I would say, and we're specifically trying to target the platform for different profiles. So if you're traveling on business, you're going to see the Uber Black, the Comfort for business. If you're, you know, traveling as part of a public transit partnership, your app experience is going to look very different as well, but paid for in large part by public transit funds. So it's really catering to the person and what they use it for. And we're actually using a good bit of our kind of AI on the background to figure out that experience.
So given this landscape, what's working really well? What do you see that, you know, really where you're accomplishing some of the goals and things are working? What are some examples there?
One example that we have that works pretty well is cooperation with airlines. So we have a good partnership with KLM, the Dutch airline, where we're progressively replacing short journey by air with rail journey, high-speed rail journey from Belgium to the Netherlands and then on to long haul, with the ambition to really partner with KLM to proactively remove those flights. So they're completely buying into this. It's a very, you know, they're very willing to do this, and I think the public is seeing this in a very positive eye. And so it's how do we go further? How do we very much fine-tune the experience of a train and the luggage transfer and the information, etc. So we have progress to make, but it's a great initiative of something that's working really well at the moment.
And you're solving a lot of things that people are always, you know, speaking of, certainly fuel costs for the airlines, sustainability, those sorts of things are very, very critically important to address, and you're kind of dealing with it together. Any other examples of things that are working well?
Yeah, for us, like what we're seeing is really the response, right, of the users. So the numbers we're getting every day on the platform, we're getting almost to 1 billion of searches on our properties, selling one ticket a second almost, like through all our partners. But what I would really say that is, like, you know, the proof of what we're trying to do in terms of like giving user more options is some of these transformative habits and behaviors. So for example, two key examples that for us are virtuous thing that we saw in the past across two markets, Italy and Spain, that are two markets where I think competitions and, you know, the fact that there are different players that are all going in the right directions are bringing results. On the route Milan-Rome, that historically is like the most like frequented like a route by flights in the past, we've seen a big shift in these past 10 years, where actually the share of train, like because of the accessibility of information, more players, you know, competing with each other, increased massively. So actually went from 37 to 75%, and
wow.
The air share actually went down from 50 to 14%.
Wow.
So this is really, you know, the result and the proof of these changes of behavior. And similarly in Spain, which is again is another market where you can see this like benefit of like more players, more competitions that ultimately also drive prices down for the customer. So volume increases, but then like the price per kilometers per user is decreasing year on year. So for example, last year was 16%, 17% less than the year before. So I think all of these data points, you know, kind of, you know, are for us proof of the fact that we're going in the right direction.
Yeah. Which again is great. You're checking multiple boxes. You know, city center to city center transportation. You know, better affordability. All it's fantastic. What about Uber?
Yeah. So I would say a few things. One of our main goals is to reduce personal car ownership. And bringing on other modes of transportation onto the platform is one way that we do that. Like through our partnership with Omio, we now have ticketing with rail on the platform in the UK and Spain. And we're seeing a lot of success there. We also have, you can rent a car through Uber Rent. You can get a shuttle from LaGuardia into the city center. We're bringing on different modes. We recently completed a study, One Less Car in North America, where we recruited about 170 participants across 7 cities, and we incentivized them to give up their personal car. After the conclusion of the study, we found 70% of them really said they were going to use their car less, 20% said they were going to give it up. And what was really interesting is that they needed 4 modes of reliable transportation in order to get there. So public transit, walking, carpooling, and Uber were the top 4 modes that they needed. We are really passionate about that space and bringing together these modes into an easy-to-use platform, and even surfacing our own Uber rides into other platforms to make it more accessible for everybody, and reducing personal car ownership, which has so many benefits for communities and environmental as well.
And the hassle of people owning cars, getting them maintained, fuel costs, all those sorts of things, which there are more efficient, sustainable ways to do it. Okay, well, we've talked a little bit about what's working well. Time to talk about friction points. What are kind of the barriers that are standing you in the way of the good fight?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're making a lot of progress in terms of presenting the options to customer, being able to buy seamlessly more complex itineraries and juxtaposing rail with other rail operators, but also multimodal. But then it's on the D-Day when people travel, it's how do you keep track of the customers when something goes wrong? We're operating in very complex network in Europe. They are operating at capacity. It's very busy. It's quite complex to transfer in cities like Paris. Changing station is not an easy thing. They are basically big open hubs, if you want. Mm-hmm. And yeah, when something goes wrong, when you have delays, is how do we cater properly for the customer and don't lose track of them? It's not like it's an airport where it's a confined environment and you know where people are. It's really how do we collaborate, just the same way that we do for the selling part, but just to make sure that throughout the experience, when something goes wrong, that we can look after the customer.
Yeah, and you have travelers who are doing themselves thinking they're being clever, and they go, oh, I'm going to save 10 euros. And it's like, oh, didn't notice it was a different station. So, with a 15-minute connection or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's really anticipating, informing, rebooking, and making sure that the carrier is also, looped into this and be able to, with the clever platform selling us, making sure that we find solution also on the day of travel.
I'll say the connected journey is very hard operationally. We've dabbled in it recently with Brightline trains in Florida, where as part of a Brightline Plus ticket, you would get a subsidy towards an Uber, and the Uber would be at the door, the train, waiting for you when you arrive. We had about a 20% reliability issue, trying to time when the passenger would walk out the door and the Uber would need to be there. And so we've since pivoted the tech to have like an SMS where you click it and the car will be there when you're ready. But it's very hard, and probably one of the biggest reasons why we haven't created the full connected journey inside our app is the operational and customer service side of it.
And I couldn't agree more, right? So it's definitely, these are 2 of the points that we also see. So to make sure that we have a process end-to-end for the customer that allows to tackle all the different things that may happen also when you cannot control it directly, because there are suppliers and other players that are in between. The connected journey as well is something that we are doing, but it's not easy, right? And it's not easy in the way that then you collect the information, so access to the data, provide the data to the users to then anticipate what is happening and make sure that you minimize as much as possible the disruptions. If I can add also on top of this, I think there are also some elements that are more like macroeconomic factors for us. So for example, barriers to enter in some markets, in like, limiting competitions, as we saw, right? Competition is actually good, right? For the industry effort and for the customer ultimately. Some monopolistic behaviors in some markets as well that as well slow down innovation and slow down then digitalization for the entire sector. So also all these dynamics, right, connected to then, maybe limiting access to data or, preventing, the right data that then could improve the user experience are some point of attention for us, right, where we need to do more, push more to accelerate and go at the speed that we would want.
So with that, with some of the challenges, maybe to break it down, is it an issue of the technologies that, say, the suppliers are being used or your partners are using, or is it a data quality issue where maybe that isn't working, or the interoperability? Maybe there's good data, there's good technology on those, but it's the interoperability. What are some of the issues from more of a systemic, structural perspective?
Yeah.
One thing that I had in mind was, so yesterday I received a push notification from Uber pushing a travel from York in northern England to Paris, meaning, well, go by train and you connect from a first train journey, then on to a Eurostar to Paris. And I think actually these are really good push to put people in people's mind, like, oh, these are actually journeys I can make by rail that are easy to book, etc. I think it's really interesting to test demand and see where actually there is demand. And then when we can see that there is, then it's really interesting for the carriers to then say, well, now we know there is demand. Now we know there is appetite for the sort of city pairs. How about we work together, carriers on our side, to sort of say, well, clearly there are there's demand between two ODs, and we should put something together. We should products together. We should have through ticketing and putting more flexibility into the tickets, or really partnering where we can see there is demand, so we can just put products together and be a little bit more joined up between carriers as well. So I think that could be an avenue.
So for Omio, do you wind up with a situation when you're integrating, you have 1,000 suppliers that you're working. Do they all really have to work on the Omio API, and they have to kind of come to your standard, or do you wind up having to make modifications to work with what they're doing? I mean, how does kind of the onboarding and that sort of thing?
It's a combination of that, so that's why it's very, very complex. That's why it took us 10 years to get where we are, and that's why also there is no other players that does like across multimodal at the scale we do, because there is an operational level of complexity that is exactly touching all the points that we mentioned. So I think, as you were saying, the fact of like collaborating, right? So when there are opportunities and when we want to move and go fast and bring the innovations that we would want is absolutely key. So, and I'm very pleased, to share actually the stage today with two like-minded partners like Uber and Eurostar, because really without, putting together the right type of approach and mindset to drive these changes in the industry alone wouldn't be possible. So at Omio, we are committed to the spirit of collaboration, because I think it's really, how we can bring the best value at the table, ultimately to bring the advantages to the customer. Yeah.
So for things, Francois mentioned service disruptions, but maybe for where you mentioned the Brightline situation, are the notifications of these delays, do you have to go find them yourselves, or how's the interoperability, all these, something's gone wrong, and how do you share that with the partners so people can start, not necessarily anticipating, I guess the workflows have to anticipate those problems, but then you need kind of immediate notification of here's what's happening, here's who's impacted, and how do you deal with that?
So in our experience, it's not great.
The understatement of the conference.
So, which is why we pivoted the tech to basically use more of the Uber app infrastructure. I would say the root cause behind it all, in my perspective, is honestly motivation to bring these connected journeys together in a great, seamless way for the user. Because all of us independent companies, we make money on our core, and the money we make on these other areas, these other modes, like a lot of times we lose money on it, honestly. So It's really rallying that this is so important to develop the tech for, but it is solvable. And one example I have is actually in my transit world, where we have these tech layers, and Dallas is a great example where you can buy a $3 DART ticket and ticket yourself from door to door through multiple modes. So you can have an Uber or a different car pick you up. You don't know which car it will be. It'll drop you off at the train station or the bus station, and the ticket will go all the way through. And they do the alerts. They're more advanced, I would say, on the actual customer service side for delays and alerts. But they have the motivation to do so as well. And so that's my challenge inside Uber, is showing the value of bringing together these modes and the fact that we do need to invest in it, even if it's not going to show short-term results on the P&L.
Right. Yeah, I live in Dallas, and I thought a requirement to live in Dallas was having your own personal car. I mean, that's how the city was designed. But I mean, something like that is just a huge, huge game changer for a lot of people, and just convenience for the average individual who probably hasn't tried it, who hasn't really tried it yet. We have a little bit of time left. You have an audience of a lot of important people or influential. They have like, what do you need to help these connected trips happen? What do these folks from tech startups to big established players, what do they need to do to help you guys accomplish your goals?
I think, as I said, to make sure that there is like an open mind, right, to move towards the concept of innovations and go a little bit beyond the short term, as Jen was saying. So really looking up for the long-term journey that we are all making together to make travel more sustainable, more innovative, and better for the user, which sometimes requires decisions that are not easy and require resources and investment. But ultimately, if we really want to have in the industry the same impact and progress that we've seen in other industries, I come from also other sectors before, from music, from sports, and I saw how like the entire ecosystem started to move through enablers in the right directions. That's really how we were able to bring the changes.
Yeah, I would say there's a real need for standardization in terms of a lot of the system we're using in rail. Making sure that rail was thought very much domestic when it's been built over, tens of years, and making it more international, more interconnected across several countries in Europe, really needs some standardization, and we're working on it, but a lot of tech providers will support us doing this. And it's also buying into this long-term vision. I think you say sometimes in the short term, this is not necessarily, it can be loss-making, but it's really how do we see beyond how do we seize the opportunity for more connected journeys, going further by rail, and belief in that investment, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. For us, we're less on rail versus air and more around reducing personal car, but it's all related, and we love the partnership with rail. But it's really around bringing the innovation and showing these communities how great it is to rely less on personal cars. We've got autonomous on the horizon coming quite soon on our platform, and we're really focused on how do we build all these experiences into the platform to make it easy, for people not to own their own personal car. And I think anything we can do to help out with that, mission is really awesome.
Yeah, and I'd argue from my work at Phocuswright, you look at, especially Gen Z, that sort of thing, they've been trained on Starbucks, right? It's their own personal order, unique, made exactly, a number of shots, that sort of thing, done, delivered through the app. They give them money in advance to go make that happen. And Uber's and then also Uber, right? You've really nailed the user interface where you can make sure that it's super easy, the payment happens. So thanks very much to Veronica, Francois, Jen. Need to make that happen across the whole journey. Owning your own customer and living in your walled garden, that's fine. But boy, for the traveler, I think you need to get everything connected. So thanks very much for the insight.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.